As a wife of a veteran, I wanted to do something special this Veterans Day for my husband to celebrate his military service. So today I'm going to show you how you can make your own foundation paper piecing patterns to make something special for that veteran that's in your life. I decided to use his retirement rank as the centerpiece of my design. He retired as a senior master sergeant, and so I found myself a good picture of that, and that's where I'm starting. You can do this on paper or you can do this on any art program. The one I'm using is the free one that came with my tablet. And so the first thing that I actually did is I focused on the star portion because it's round. I found a traditional block that was going to work for this centerpiece. So once I did that, I basically just created myself a block that's going to cover that area. And this is basically going to split this up a little bit. And let's just make the lines just a little bit bigger so we can see them. And I'm just going to do them in green. So I can just get this shape as close as possible to where it's actually going to be in this design. And so once I did that, it was time for me to start splitting up the rest of the design. And so one of the places that I've already noticed that I'm going to have to kind of create a line is going to be right there. And I'm going to need to create a line that's going to separate right around here. So I can copy my block and can just start kind of putting this block in places to start overlapping and collecting the different areas of where this insignia is. Okay, so I have that, and then right here in the center where the chevrons come up to a point, it's really more centered. The easiest way to do something like a point like this is to have the seam be on a point. So I'm already going to kind of start by changing the rest of my shape by drawing myself a line. That's going to basically separate that in half, and if I need to adjust it, I can. So I can get it right in the center part there. And then I can elongate and widen my shape here to cover all of that. So I basically have created a grid from which I'm able to start making the different pieces of my foundation paper piecing pattern. So next we're going to start drawing some lines. And these lines that we're going to be drawing next are going to be what we're going to connect all of the pieces. So I'm just going to start at the bottom, going to draw these lines out. And you know, I can tell that this is a little curvy, so I'm probably going to flatten out some of these lines a little bit more, not worry about the curves, because that's going to make the paper piecing easier. And I just want to kind of continue to do that in the various shapes. And as I go from one block to the next block, I am like lifting my pencil so that it is creating its own shape. And if I don't like how one came out, I can always get rid of it and redo it. So like this one, I probably should have done a little bit more of an angle. All right, so I'm going to do that all the way around my picture that I have here. Once I've done that, I'm going to get rid of the picture itself. But now I have these individual blocks of the different shapes that I have. So the next part would be to separate each of these individual blocks. So I have one that I've completed. So in this program here, I just kind of randomly moved them in different places to get them out of touching each other. And then this one happens to have a way of sort of making my own slides. And so they call them scenes. And what I did is I made sure to enlarge each screen exactly the same size. So for me, I did 400%, got everything, including the largest blocks, into the frame. And then I was able to create these individual scenes. So if we go to each scene, we'll see each of the blocks that we drew out for our patterns. From there, I just turned this into a PDF. The PDF I then printed, making sure that my pictures filled the page as much as possible, maintaining exactly the same enlargement all the way through. That's the most important part. The enlargement has to be the same. So these come out around 6-something inches, and that's where we're going to kind of focus on the next part of the process. If you're enjoying our segment on paper piecing, be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. After I printed out my designs, I then created my seam allowance for each block. So I just took a ruler and I went on the papers and I marked 1/4 of an inch all around that block. And then I just cut them down so they're just slightly larger than that seam allowance for when I go to do the paper piecing. Next, I laid them back out so we could see the pattern. And I did some checking by overlapping to make sure that everything is going to line up. You can also see where in the drawings, I just fixed any lines that didn't go to the edge. The next thing I did is I started labeling. So I started at the top and labeled these A, B, C, D, E, F through J so that I knew what order they would need to go in once I sewed the individual pieces. For this next part, you have to kind of decide where you want to do your first piece and what you're going to seam next to each one of those. And so oftentimes if I have like a large block like this one here, this is going to be the first one that I'm going to put on. And then since these are just stripes, it makes the most sense to go in order. So I just labeled them with numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then I added myself a code for the color of fabric that I needed. So this is going to be a blue background. This will be a white stripe, blue, white, and blue. And so I did that on all of them. So you might be tempted initially to do something like this as your first one, but this is going to be a seam that's going to cover all of these. So this is going to be logically the last one that you'd want to do. The other thing you might be kind of tempted to do is maybe this one is the first one, but I've got 2 different angles. So it actually makes more sense to do one of the stripes. And so I did 1, 2, and 3, and then did this one as a 4. So when I did the 5th one, I would then get this line because these are going to obviously cross when you sew. And then 6 and 7 came back down to finish the bottom part here with 8 and 9, and then you would put on the 10. And of course, if you make a mistake and you're in the middle of sewing going, hey, it would be better if I do this one, you can change it. It's your pattern, so feel free to do so. All right, so we have our pattern. We've checked to make sure that everything is in alignment. Now we want to do some sewing. All right, so the first thing that you're going to want to do is you are going to want to fold all of your lines. And so once you've done that, you're ready to begin. So we're going to start with G1 here, which is blue fabric. So I'm just going to make sure that I have a piece of blue fabric, and I want to place it so that the wrong side of the fabric is against the back of the paper. Now there are some tips and tricks for doing this. Some people will use a little bit of glue. You can also just pin it in place. And then the next part is where you're going to fold that paper back. And so what you're going to do next is you're going to cut your seam allowance. And then the next one that I'm actually going to do is going to be G2, which is in white. So I'm going to fold this back and I'm just going to get myself a strip of white. And now this is the hardest part is getting started, because this is the right side. So this first one is going to be the right side. The rest of the time, you're lining the right side of your next fabric with the right side of the fabric. Forget about the paper. And so you're going to line that up, and you can fold your paper back. So I'm going to pin that in place. So let's go sew our first seam. All right, so we're going to fold the paper back over, and now we're going to sew on that line that's between 1 and 2. Being sure that our fabric is not shifting since we did not glue it down. You want to sew a little bit before your line, and you want to make sure you're using a tighter stitch than you normally do when you are doing seam allowances. It's just going to help hold it together, and I'm using a thicker paper, so you might be like, the tension looks a little weird. It's because of the paper. It's going to be fine. You're using a tighter stitch anyway, and we're just going to make sure that our fabric isn't shifting too much since we've already cut our seam allowance, and we're just going to sew. You want to sew over both sides of the line, so you start and the stop here, and you can see the tight stitches and how I basically sewed on the line. So the next part is we're just going to take our pins out, and we're going to flip it over, and we're going to finger press our fabric over. And then we're ready to move on to the next seam. So we're going to refold now between G2 and G3. And now we're going to cut our seam allowance again. And we're gonna grab our next color that we need, which is blue, just like we did before. Line up the right sides, making sure that it's going to cover the whole area. And as my pieces get bigger, I use a few more pins. And you can always overlap even just a little bit more because you can always cut your seam allowance. You don't want it too small of a seam because that's when things are gonna pull out. And then we just go and sew the next one. So I'm going to continue just putting on each of the pieces here for all of the patterns that I need to do, and then I'll come back and I'll tell you the next step. For the next part of the quilt, I decided to focus on my husband's 2 highest ranks, which are mostly in reds, whites, and blues. And so I had this really cute red, white, and blue jelly roll that I used to make the various size stripes and sewed them to the top and the bottom. Then I just wanted a nice patriotic border, so I just simply found a nice pattern of red, white, and blue with the stars here, and then found myself a nice fun background, this different color red and white stars for the backing of the wall hanging. Now we're ready to go to the quilt machine and start really personalizing this. For this open part here, I decided I was going to use his command patch as the inspiration for that. And to do that, I used the new picture stitcher that we have in the design store. So you simply go to Picture Stitcher, find the image that you want to use, crop anything that you need to. I think the cropping looks good. And follow the instructions that are on the left-hand side of the screen. To learn more about Picture Stitcher, check out one of the videos that we have here on our YouTube channel, and don't forget to like and subscribe. For the stripes, I just decided I was going to do a little ruler work. I may do some free motioning in the stripes themselves, but I haven't decided. After I downloaded my images and put it in my QCT 6 Pro, I decided I wanted to do a little bit of tweaking. You don't have to do this, but I wanted you to know that you can do this in Gold using PatternCAD. So I can come in here and adjust any of the things that I want to adjust. I can remove additional things that I don't want or fix endpoints so I have less breaks when I go to do the stitching. All right, so I have saved off my version, and we're going to go ahead and use Select and Sew to place it. I'm going to use the marking tool so that I can properly size and place my design. And then we're just going to stitch the design. So next I decided I was going to use the gold feature of the font stitcher in order to stitch out his dates of service and his name. So I'm just going to peek at my phone so I put the right date in. And once I've put it in and I've selected my font, I just have to give it a name, and then I'm ready to just place and quilt it. For the borders, I'm just going to find a cute patriotic pantograph. So I'm just going to continue to quilt this. I will put a link to the pattern for the circle star. So remember to like and subscribe and share your Veterans Day projects with us in the comments below.